Hi BookTube, I'm here with my first video for VEDA. I'm very excited. This month I have a whole bunch of videos planned and I'm really excited to share some of them with you. Well, share all of them with you, not some of them. I wouldn't share videos I wouldn't want to share. So this is going to be part 3 actually in a series of videos that I've actually uploaded already. I'm calling it the No Shame series. Just a disclaimer that, you know, again, disagreement fosters community and discussion and, you know, all these issues that I think we need to talk about in not only the BookTube community but in the larger literary book community as well. So today's topic is going to be about reading science fiction. Now, I'm Canadian and I love Canadian literature, but I absolutely have a hard time with Margaret Atwood because I don't think she knows what she's doing. And with that I mean she doesn't know anything about genres and subgenres and all this stuff. And so she thinks science fiction has monsters and spaceships in it, or is about talking squid from space. And she does not wish for her work, which is clearly science fiction, to be labeled as such. We have other authors like Kazuo Ishiguro, who has expressed concern that one of his more recent books, The Buried Giant, would be perceived as fantasy. And some people are actually speculating that they don't want these authors don't want their books to be classified as science fiction or fantasy, because these genres tend not to be front runners for literary awards. So they're kind of acknowledging the snobbery around literary awards and participating in it as well. So they're kind of like hypocritical. Michael Chabon is actually a supporter of science fiction, and he actually said, you know, I'm reading off a quote here, that's why I'm looking away. I had been taught early on in college and graduate school that I wouldn't be taken seriously if I wrote genre fiction. And not only would I not be taken seriously, but people just really didn't want to read it. Like my workshop mates and my workshop leaders. I had workshop leaders who just out and out said, please do not turn science fiction into this workshop. And so I want to address this question of why is there such disdain from these authors / readers for science fiction and fantasy? I mean, why can't they just see it as literary fiction? I mean, there's no denying that certain classics of the science fiction and fantasy genre are considered literary fiction. I mean, what else would you call Lord of the Rings? I mean, there's an example of literary fiction there. I mean, obviously, I think the Dune world, the Dune series is beautiful. A lot of the work by Arthur C. Clarke and Ray Bradbury and Isaac Asimov are really quite works of literary genius that just happen to be in science fiction or fantasy. So I think it's very important for us to read science fiction, and to think about science fiction, and to watch science fiction, and to write science fiction, and to give science fiction awards that aren't necessarily geared for science fiction books, for a multitude of reasons. First of all, some of the great classics of our time are science fiction and fantasy, as I said before. I mean, what would the literary world be without Lord of the Rings? It would be nothing without Lord of the Rings, without Brave New World in 1984, without the Foundation series, without Dune, without Star Wars, without 2001: A Space Odyssey, Fahrenheit 451, 28,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Frankenstein, Dracula, Alice in Wonderland, and Midsummer's Night Dream is fantasy. And you can't deny that these greats aren't works of literary merit. They're ingrained in our culture even without us being conscious about it. They affect all of our writing, our reading, our speech. There are words, themes, inventions, progress that are found in all of these works that we find in our world today. I could go on and on about literary classics that fit into the science fiction fantasy genre. My second reason why you should read science fiction and fantasy is because it explores issues that are currently affecting our society, or it warns of issues that may affect our society in the future. So Atwood's claim that you'll never actually go to a galaxy far, far away and encounter Darth Vader, that's science fiction, it isn't going to happen, is completely unfound. that phone that you're holding in your hand, the computer that you are likely watching this on, the internet you are currently using, the car that takes you places, the moon landing, etc., 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 were once all science fiction. And we have them. We are traveling to the moon. We are exploring galaxies far, far away. We are encountering people like Darth Vader in our world. And it's a shame that really people can't see that. We have two different versions of science fiction, soft science fiction and hard science fiction. So soft science fiction that does not necessarily discuss the hard sciences is also very proactive about issues that affect our future. For example, 1984, Brave New World, Make Room, Make Room. They argue that we have to be more aware of our political and social structures that suppress freedom, art, literature, and life. And why would you be ashamed to read something that comments on society if it does so using genre conventions? It's just another way of seeing something. It's a more imaginative way of addressing these issues. So why can't it be both entertaining in the fact that you're reading a good story and educational about, you know, what you're reading about society? I think that's a very important reason to read science fiction. Third reason, science fiction is a literature of philosophy. It allows us to approach the future and understand the universe. It is a literature that confronts us with the consequences of our actions. It is a literature that encourages us to question everything, including authority and those that would dismiss its importance as literature as a whole. So I think without the topics discussed in science fiction and fantasy, that it would be less likely to address these issues of authority and people trying to tell us what certain things are, like Margaret Atwood. I'm really picking on her a lot because I really disagree with a lot of what she says. Fourth and final reason I think we should read science fiction. Science fiction fantasy explores at its core what it means to be human. By positioning humans in extreme situations, we see how humans react. We see what humans are, what they're willing to fight for, and how they're willing to fight for it. Science fiction is not important because it tells us the future exists, but because it tells us that the future can be overcome. I've kind of stole that kind of quote from Neil Gaiman and readjusted it to fit science fiction. That at our core we remain the same and that we fight for our values. Science fiction is about humans encountering change, which is inevitable. It attempts to answer the question that plagues us all. Why are we here? What is our purpose? And what makes humans humans? So in some cases, by juxtaposing humans with non-humans, with aliens, with technology, with artificial intelligence, science fiction fantasy authors are attempting to provide us with answers to these questions. That's the core at all literature, is what does it mean to be human? And science fiction and fantasy really does a great job at this. Individual science fiction stories may seem as trivial to the blinder critics and philosophers of the day, but the core of science fiction, its essence, has become crucial to our salvation if we are to be saved at all. That is a quote from Isaac Asimov. So should you be ashamed to read a genre that does all of this and more? No! Continue to be proud to read and write and watch and think about science fiction fantasy and be loud and proud about it. It is an awesome genre, and it is... there are masterpieces within it of literary genius. I'm just going to leave you with this quote from Ursula K. Le Guin, who is notorious in her ongoing debate with Margaret Atwood about using the science fiction and fantasy as a genre. Hard times are coming when we will be wanting the voices of writers who can see alternatives to how we live now and can see through our fear-stricken society and its obsessive technologies to other ways of being, and even imagine some real grounds for hope. We will need writers who can remember freedom, poets, visionaries, the realists of a larger reality. So let me know down below what your thoughts are on literary fiction and science fiction and fantasy, or other genre writing for that matter, and remember to keep on reading whatever you want to read.